The house stood silent, a picture of normalcy. John was mowing the lawn, the smell of cut grass filling the air. Inside, Mary hummed a tune, her hands busy in the kitchen. Upstairs, little Sophie played with her dolls, her laughter echoing through the hallway. Then, the world exploded.
Sophie! His little girl! He scrambled towards the house, each breath a struggle. The air was thick with dust and the smell of burning. John choked, his heart pounding against his ribs. He stumbled over debris, his eyes frantically searching. "Sophie!" he screamed, his voice raw with terror. "Mary, where were they?" Then he saw it, a limp hand, small and pale, protruding from beneath a pile of rubble. His blood ran cold. His Sophie? He rushed to her, his hands trembling as he frantically pulled away chunks of wood and plaster. "No, no, no," he sobbed, his voice lost in the chaos. This couldn't be happening.
Days blurred into weeks. The world moved on, but John remained trapped in the wreckage of his life. He couldn't escape the memory of that day, the image of Sophie's hand buried under the debris. The guilt was a suffocating weight on his chest.
He should have been inside, he should have protected her. Mary, his wife, was a ghost, haunting the ruins of their marriage. Her grief was a cold, hard thing. She blamed him. Her words were like poison, seeping into his wounds, festering. "You were supposed to keep her safe," she'd spit, her voice devoid of the love it once held. He couldn't bear to stay in the house, the air thick with unspoken accusations. He found solace in the wreckage, spending hours sifting through the debris, searching for, he didn't know what, a sign, a reason, a way to turn back time. One day he found Sophie's favorite doll, its porcelain face cracked, one eye missing. He clutched it to his chest, the feel of the worn fabric a painful reminder of what he'd lost. As he held the doll, he heard it, a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Daddy!" He told Mary about the whisper, desperate for some shared understanding, some sliver of comfort.
"There are no whispers, John," she said, her voice flat. "Only the wind whistling through the ruins you created."
The doctor called it survivor's guilt, prescribed pills to quiet the whispers, to dull the pain. John took them reluctantly. The silence they offered a poor substitute for the vibrant life that once filled their home. But even the drugs couldn't completely erase the feeling of Sophie's presence, the faint scent of her strawberry shampoo, the fleeting glimpses of her shadow dancing in the corners of his vision. He started seeing her in the wreckage, a small figure with sad eyes, watching him. He'd reach out, but she'd always be just out of reach, her tiny voice echoing in his head. "Why, Daddy? Why didn't you save me?" The guilt gnawed at him, a constant, relentless ache. He was drowning in it, the weight of her absence pulling him under. He started talking to her, pouring out his grief and remorse to the empty air. He knew it was madness, but he couldn't help himself. He was losing his grip, teetering on the precipice of sanity. The whispers grew stronger, evolving from faint murmurs to clear, chilling pronouncements of despair and anger. They seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house, soaked in the memory of the explosion, echoing with the finality of Sophie's fate. He could feel her pain, raw and consuming, a tangible presence in the silence. One night he woke to the sound of Sophie crying. He rushed to her room, his heart pounding in his chest, only to find it empty, the air thick with the scent of strawberry shampoo. He sank to his knees, burying his face in his hands, the sound of her sobs echoing in his ears. It was unbearable, this torment, this constant reminder of his failure. He started seeing her more often now, not just fleeting glimpses, but full-bodied apparitions, her eyes accusing, her small voice filled with a rage he couldn't comprehend. She was changing, her innocent features twisting into something grotesque, her sorrow morphing into a chilling need for retribution. He tried to explain, to apologize, to beg for her forgiveness, but his words seemed to dissolve into the ether, unheard, unnoticed. She was no longer the loving child he remembered, but a vessel of vengeance, her spirit warped by the violence of her death, her innocence replaced by a chilling thirst for justice. In this chapter, John's world shrunk, the boundaries between reality and delusion blurring. He saw Sophie everywhere, felt her presence in every shadow, heard her whispers in the rustling leaves. The guilt was a physical presence now, a monstrous thing that clung to him, suffocating him. He stopped sleeping, haunted by nightmares of the explosion, of Sophie's terrified face, of Mary's cold, accusing eyes.
His days were spent in a haze of grief and fear, his mind a battleground where reason fought a losing battle against the insidious whispers of revenge that filled his every waking moment. He sought solace in the bottle, the burn of cheap whiskey, a momentary distraction from the torment that consumed him. He knew he was spiraling, knew he needed help, but he was terrified of what would happen if he let go, if he allowed the guilt to fully consume him. He clung to the wreckage of his sanity, a shipwrecked sailor clinging to a piece of driftwood in a stormy sea.
One night, he saw her standing at the foot of his bed, her eyes burning with an eerie light. Her voice, no longer the sweet sound he remembered, was a raspy whisper, filled with an ancient, chilling rage.
"You will pay, Daddy," she hissed, her words slithering into his soul like venomous snakes. "You will all pay."
And so, as the lines between the past and the present, the real and the unreal, continued to blur, John found himself caught in a terrifying spiral, descending ever deeper into the glimmer of madness. The line between reality and nightmare had vanished entirely. John existed in a perpetual twilight, haunted by visions of Sophie, tormented by her whispers, consumed by the chilling certainty that she was no longer a lost child but a vengeful spirit.
His love for her, once a source of joy, had transformed into a terrifying obsession. He saw her everywhere, lurking in the shadows, whispering from the drain, her voice dripping with venom.
She was always watching, always judging, her eyes reflecting a depth of hatred that chilled him to the bone. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, demanding retribution for a life unjustly taken.
His attempts to reason with her, to appease her, were met with chilling laughter. She reveled in his torment, feeding off his guilt and despair.
He was trapped in a macabre dance with the ghost of his daughter, his every move dictated by her whispers, his every thought consumed by the chilling certainty of her impending revenge.
He tried to warn Mary, to make her understand the danger they were in, but his words tumbled out in a jumbled mess, fueled by fear and despair.
She looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust, dismissing his claims as the ramblings of a broken man.
But he knew the truth. Sophie was back, and she wasn't here for forgiveness. The house, once a sanctuary of laughter and love, had become a prison of fear. Every creak of the floorboard, every sigh of the wind sent shivers down John's spine. The air was thick with Sophie's presence, her pain a tangible entity that pressed down on him, suffocating him.
He wandered through the ruined rooms like a lost soul, each step a reminder of his failure. The walls seemed to whisper her name, the broken furniture bearing silent witness to the horror of that day.
He saw her reflection in every shattered mirror, her eyes blazing with an unholy light, her lips curled into a chilling smile. He tried to escape her, to find solace in the outside world, but she followed him like a shadow, her whispers echoing in his ears, her presence a suffocating weight on his chest.
He was tethered to her, bound by his guilt and her insatiable need for vengeance. The world around him faded into a blur, his senses overwhelmed by the intensity of her rage.
He was lost in a labyrinth of his own making, each turn leading him deeper into the heart of her darkness. He was no longer in control, his will crumbling under the relentless assault of her ghostly fury. Mary watched John's descent into madness with a detached curiosity. Her grief had hardened her, transforming her love for him into a cold, bitter resentment. She blamed him for Sophie's death, for the shattered remnants of their lives.
His whispers, his visions were nothing more than a manifestation of his guilt, a desperate attempt to shift the blame.
But lately something had changed. The air in the house felt different, heavier, charged with an unseen energy.
She started hearing things, faint whispers that seemed to slither from the walls, the sound of Sophie's laughter echoing in the dead of night.
She dismissed them at first, attributing them to her own fractured psyche. But as the days passed, a seed of doubt began to grow in her heart.
One night he woke to find John standing over their bed, his eyes wild, his face contorted in a mask of terror. "She's here!" he whispered, his voice hoarse with fear. "She's come for us."
Mary tried to soothe him, to reason with him, but he just shook his head, his gaze fixed on something only he could see. "She's going to make us pay," he mumbled, his words sending a chill down her spine.
For the first time, Mary felt a flicker of fear. Could John be right? Could Sophie's spirit truly be seeking revenge? The air crackled with anticipation. The boundary between the living and the dead had thinned, the veil between worlds stretched to its breaking point. John, his sanity hanging by a thread, could feel Sophie's presence growing stronger, her rage a palpable force that threatened to consume everything in its path.
He was no longer in control, a puppet dancing to the rhythm of her ghostly vendetta.
Mary felt a chill run down her spine as she watched John. His eyes, once filled with love and warmth, were now vacant, his gaze distant, lost in a world she couldn't reach.
A wave of unease washed over her. The whispers she had dismissed as figments of John's guilt now echoed in her own ears, carrying a chilling familiarity that sent shivers down her spine. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating, as if an unseen presence had descended upon them. Suddenly the lights flickered and died, plunging the house into darkness. A blood-curdling scream tore through the silence, followed by the sickening thud of a body hitting the floor. In the distance, a child's laughter echoed through the darkness, cold and cruel, a chilling testament to a vengeance served, leaving behind an unsettling silence that spoke volumes about the horrors that had unfolded. The house stood silent once more. A tomb now, not just of memories, but of souls consumed by a tragedy too profound to comprehend. Sophie's vengeance was complete, leaving behind a chilling reminder that some wounds, even death, cannot heal.